The rectory was originally small, but enlarged to house a family with 14 children. Even before Reverend Herringham lived there, there's evidence that shows there was another home on that site. The church that it relates to dates back to the 12th century and serves a rather large community, and I hate this word, but it's a very rural area. Many farmhouses and the original remains of the Borley Hall can be seen scattered throughout the hillsides. Many paranormal people like to state there's a story of a Benedictine monastery that was built in the area back in 1362. In addition to that, a monk from that monastery had a relationship with a nun from a nearby convent. Catholics of the time, not wanting anything to be marred, discovered this, and the monk was executed, and the nun bricked up alive within the convent walls. Of course, this story, as many stories go, turned out to not be true. But the first time anyone ever thought of anything paranormal there comes around the same time as it was built. Many people had heard footsteps as they visited the home. In the year 1900, 4 of the daughters of the rector living there reported seeing what they thought was a ghost of a nun. As they walked up to try to talk to the nun, she disappeared. I find that amazing. So we have a large property with spirit activity right after it was built. Other people claim a variety of paranormal incidents, such as a phantom carriage being driven by 2 headless horsemen. The second rector died in 1892, and his son took over. In 1911, he married a younger divorcee. And they moved away to the Chiltern Lodge. After the rector passed, the rectory was vacant until the new rector came in. And when he did, his wife, Mrs. Smith, was cleaning out a cupboard when she came across a brown paper package, inside which was the skull of a young woman. Shortly after finding this, weird incidents began occurring throughout the home. She would hear the sounds of servant bells ringing. The strings had been cut on those bells. Lights would appear in windows, and footsteps would appear out of nowhere. She too saw the horse-drawn carriage at night. They were convinced enough that they contacted the Daily Mirror newspaper and asked them to get in touch with the Society for Psychical Research. So the newspaper sent out a reporter and Mr. Harry Price, a paranormal researcher at the time, to make their first visit to the place. They arrived on 12 June of 1929. Upon arriving, phenomena of a new kind appeared, such as the throwing of stones, of vase, and other objects. Spirit messages were tapped out from the frame of a mirror, and as soon as Harry Price left, they ceased. Mrs. Smith said he was the conjurer or the fabricator of those events. The Smiths left Borley in July of 1929, and they had a hard time finding a replacement, only because of the reported paranormal incidents. So the Foisters, moved in, and they wrote an account of the various strange incidents that occurred as well, which they then sent to Harry Price. That was 1935. They too heard bell ringing, windows breaking, stones, bottles being thrown, and someone writing on the wall. Their daughter was locked away in a room with no key when the writing occurred. The wife, Mrs. Foister, claimed a whole range of poltergeist phenomena, which included her being thrown from her own bed. On one occasion, Adelaide, their daughter, was attacked by something horrible. The religious folk they attempted an exorcism, but their efforts proved worthless. In the middle of the first exorcism, a stone was thrown the size of a human fist. Because of how famous this place was from the newspaper articles and everything else, different psychic researchers and other paranormal groups began to believe that whether or not she was trying this or not trying this, that the Reverend's wife, Marianne Foister, was actually responsible for the activities herself. Well, we came to find out that later on that Marianne was disturbed, in fact, and that she was having a sexual relationship with the lodger, Frank Peerless, and that she used the paranormal explanations to cover up her liaisons with Mr. Peerless. Borley then remained vacant again for some time. That's when Mr. Price took out a rental agreement on the home for 1 year. What he did was he rented out the location for 1 year, and he asked observers, independent of course, to come in and sit with him on these investigations over the year. That way someone could corroborate his story for him. There was 48 of them, and they called the corps of official observers. Most of them were students, and they were left with instructions just to report any odd phenomena that may occur. In March 1938, Helen Glanville conducted a planchette seance, which we all know as a Ouija board. Using the planchette, it's rumored that she had contact with 2 separate spirits. The first was of a young nun, which correlates to the sighting of the first residents. The name of the nun was Marie Lair, and it is claimed that she had been murdered on the site of the rectory. Someone else had said the name of the nun was Evangeline Westcott, so they don't necessarily jive. The stories were close to the stories told, but the names contradict each other. The name Marie Lair was later found out that she was a former nun, not an active nun, who had married in France and moved to England and awaited her husband to arrive and live with her there. He never arrived, and she was murdered. According to the seance, she was murdered in the year 1667. Also, according to a psychic, Marie was condemned to wander restlessly as her spirit searched for a holy burial ground. And Marie is also directly linked to the writings on the wall, as they were pleas for help. There are no historical documents that ever reference her name. The second spirit to be contacted went by the name of Sonix Amures, and he claimed that he would set fire to the rectory at 9 o'clock that night. He also said at the time the bones of a murdered person would be revealed. The predictions of the man came to pass, and in a way, but not that night. It was shortly thereafter, on February 27th, 1939, the new owner of the rectory, a Captain Gregson, reported that he was unpacking boxes when an oil lamp in the hallway overturned. The fire spread quickly. The rectory was damaged beyond repair. Miss Williams of the Borley Lodge said she saw the figure of the ghostly nun in the upstairs window and, according to Harry Price, demanded a fee of 1 guinea for her story. The burning of the rectory was investigated by the insurance company and found to be fraudulent. Harry Price, acting out on the seance, that said that they would find bones, dug underneath the home briefly in the cellars of the ruined home, and 2 bones, thought to be of a young woman, were discovered, along with a medal of Saint Ignatius. Further digs happened, and nothing was found. The bones were given a Christian burial in Liston churchyard. The rector believed that the ceremony would enable the spirit of Marie Lair to go to rest. There are reports of a nun being sighted on these grounds. Black shapes, I'm imagining shadow people. Lights are seen zipping from one side to the other. Poltergeist activity, other reports at the Borley Rectory. There are also other accounts which may have increased paranormal activity that in the late 16th and early 17th centuries, witchcraft was performed on the property. During that time, Joan Norfolk and Margaret Gann Wells were accused of witchcraft that resulted in the murder of their victims in the late 1500s. They were then executed because of their crimes. As we said before, the rectory is still considered to be the most haunted building in England by many a person. However, so many places make that claim of how haunted they are.